So now they're coming in by land, and even the land is concerned because I told them that's going to be next. You know, the land is going to be next, and we may go to the Senate, we may go to the Congress and tell them about it. But I can't imagine they'd have any problem with it.
We're going to start with FBI agents busy this morning, arresting nearly a dozen Bay Area officers for crimes ranging from violating suspect civil rights to obstruction of justice.
Provide the safest country the nation has ever seen under President Trump's leadership here. And that's what we did here today with great resolve on a case of massive public importance.
Paramedics were delivering drugs instead of saving lives. For 4 years, 78 emergency medical technicians across Texas used ambulances as mobile drug warehouses for the Sinaloa Cartel. They transported cocaine and fentanyl with lights and sirens blaring while your community trusted them to respond to emergencies. They made fake 911 calls to justify drug deliveries. They hid narcotics in medical equipment compartments alongside oxygen tanks and defibrillators. And they moved $1.1 billion in drugs using vehicles designed to save lives. Who stops an ambulance racing to an emergency? Nobody. That's exactly what the cartel counted on. The DEA just arrested all 78 paramedics and seized 12 ambulance companies in the largest emergency services corruption case in American history. Medical supply shipments filled with fentanyl, and something agents found in those ambulances proves these paramedics weren't just corrupt, they knowingly endangered real patients while serving cartels. Subscribe to Truth America right now because this betrayal will shock you. Here's what happened. Emergency medical services operate on one fundamental principle. When an ambulance races toward an emergency, everyone gets out of the way. Police don't stop ambulances, traffic parts for them, border checkpoints wave them through, and absolutely nobody questions what's inside a vehicle responding to save someone's life. The Sinaloa Cartel understood this better than anyone. In 2020, cartel financial strategists identified a perfect smuggling opportunity: private ambulance companies. Unlike hospital-based emergency services, private ambulance companies operate as for-profit businesses, providing non-emergency medical transport, standby medical services at events, and inter-facility patient transfers. They're legitimate businesses, but they're also less regulated than hospital systems and easier to infiltrate. Between 2020 and 2021, the Sinaloa Cartel purchased controlling interests in 12 private ambulance companies across Texas through shell companies and Mexican investment firms. The companies operated in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, El Paso, and smaller cities across the state. Combined, they employed 340 paramedics and EMTs and operated 145 ambulances. The 78 paramedics recruited into the conspiracy were offered extraordinary compensation, $60,000 to $120,000 annually on top of their base salaries of $35,000, $45,000. Some paramedics tripled their income. The drugs were hidden in various ways. Some were concealed in medical equipment compartments, spaces designed for oxygen tanks, defibrillators, and medical supplies. Others were disguised as medical supply shipments being transported between facilities. In some cases, drugs were hidden inside actual medical equipment like portable oxygen tanks that had been modified to contain narcotics instead of oxygen. The operation also exploited ambulance companies' legitimate medical supply chains. The 12 companies regularly received shipments of medical equipment, medications, and supplies from distributors. The cartel infiltrated these supply chains, adding drug shipments to legitimate medical deliveries. When Texas health inspectors audited ambulance companies, they saw boxes labeled as gauze, IV supplies, and medications, all appearing normal, all actually containing cocaine and fentanyl. Over 4 years, the network moved an estimated $1.1 billion worth of drugs across Texas and to distribution points throughout the Southwest and beyond. The ambulances made thousands of emergency runs that were actually drug deliveries. And perhaps most disturbingly, some corrupt paramedics transported drugs while also responding to real emergencies, mixing legitimate patient care with cartel operations, endangering both their patients and their mission. The investigation that would destroy the ambulance cartel network began in March 2024 when DEA agents in San Antonio noticed an unusual pattern. Surveillance of a known cartel transfer location documented an ambulance arriving at 2:47 a.m. with lights and sirens off, and transferring several large bags to waiting cartel operatives. The ambulance had no patient. The emergency was fake. DEA tracked the ambulance back to Lone Star Medical Transport, a private ambulance company in San Antonio. A records check showed the company was owned by a Delaware LLC registered to an address that didn't exist. That LLC's ownership traced through several shell companies to a Mexican investment firm with known cartel ties. The ambulance company was cartel-owned. DEA contacted FBI and formed a task force to investigate what appeared to be cartel infiltration of emergency medical services. The scope of what they discovered was shocking. Not just one company, but 12 across Texas, all with similar ownership structures, all with connections to Sinaloa financial networks. Drop a comment below. Should paramedics who use ambulances for drug trafficking lose their medical licenses permanently? What's the penalty for corrupting emergency services? And if you're not subscribed to Truth America yet, hit that button. We expose how cartels infiltrate the institutions you trust. Subscribe now. In July 2024, DEA obtained federal warrants to search several ambulances. In Unit 47 from Houston Emergency Services, agents found a hidden compartment behind a wall panel containing 28 kilograms of cocaine. The compartment was sophisticated, professionally installed, accessible only by removing a panel, and designed to be invisible during routine inspections. In Unit 89 from Dallas Medical Response, agents discovered 34 kilograms of methamphetamine hidden inside modified oxygen tank containers. The tanks looked authentic, but contained drugs instead of medical oxygen. Financial investigations revealed the 78 paramedics involved showed income and spending patterns inconsistent with their salaries. Luxury vehicle purchases, expensive homes, and lavish vacations, all on salaries that averaged $40,000 annually. Bank records showed cash deposits and wire transfers from the shell companies that owned the ambulance services. The paramedics were being paid separately from their official salaries to avoid detection. Wiretaps authorized in August 2024 on suspected cartel coordinators captured discussions about ambulance runs, medical deliveries, and emergency transport schedules. One conversation referenced 78 drivers on payroll across Texas. Another discussed a shipment arriving in medical supply containers at Houston facility. The evidence was overwhelming. By October 2024, DEA had identified all 78 corrupt paramedics, documented their involvement through surveillance and financial records, and gathered evidence of $1.1 billion in drug trafficking using ambulance services designed to save lives. November 12, 2024. 5:00 a.m. DEA tactical teams coordinated with FBI, ICE, and local law enforcement across Texas for Operation Code Red, the arrest of 78 paramedics and the seizure of 12 ambulance companies in a simultaneous dawn raid spanning 7 cities. At 5:17 a.m., DEA agents executed arrest warrants. In Houston, FBI raided the headquarters of Houston Emergency Services and arrested 23 paramedics as they reported for morning shifts. The company's fleet of 34 ambulances was impounded. Agents found additional drugs hidden in medical supply warehouses, 340 kilograms of cocaine and methamphetamine stored in boxes labeled as medical equipment. In Dallas, DEA arrested 18 paramedics at Dallas Medical Response. One paramedic, Robert Chen, was actually in an ambulance preparing to respond to what appeared to be a legitimate 911 call when agents arrested him. DEA confirmed the call was real and dispatched a hospital-based ambulance to ensure the patient received care. But Chen's ambulance was searched immediately. Agents found 12 kilograms of fentanyl hidden in equipment compartments. He'd been planning to make a drug delivery during or after the emergency response. In San Antonio, agents arrested 15 paramedics at Lone Star Medical Transport. The company's owner, Marcus Rodriguez, who'd served as the primary cartel coordinator for the entire 12-company network, was arrested at his $2.8 million home. In Rodriguez's office, DEA found detailed records of drug shipments, payment ledgers for the 78 corrupt paramedics, and communications with Sinaloa operatives coordinating the entire operation. Across Texas, the arrests continued. El Paso, 12 paramedics arrested. Austin, 10 paramedics. Smaller cities, individual paramedics taken into custody at their stations or homes. By 8 a.m., all 78 paramedics and the coordinators who ran the 12 companies were in federal custody. DEA also executed search warrants on the company's medical supply warehouses. In Houston, agents seized 1.2 tons of cocaine and methamphetamine hidden in shipments labeled as medical supplies. In Dallas, 890 kilograms of fentanyl was discovered in containers marked as IV fluids and gauze. Total seizures, 2.8 tons of narcotics that had been transported using vehicles designed to save lives. The 145 ambulances operated by the 12 companies were impounded and searched. Agents found hidden compartments in 56 ambulances, professionally installed modifications designed to conceal drugs. Medical equipment was examined. Some oxygen tanks, defibrillator cases, and supply containers had been modified to carry narcotics instead of medical supplies. November 13, 2024. Attorney General Pamela Bondi held a press conference in Houston alongside DEA Administrator Ann Milgram, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and Texas Department of Public Safety Director Steve McCraw. Yesterday, federal law enforcement dismantled a Sinaloa Cartel operation that corrupted emergency medical services across Texas. 78 paramedics, professionals sworn to save lives, used ambulances to transport $1.1 billion in drugs over 4 years. They made fake 911 calls to justify drug deliveries, they hid cocaine in medical equipment compartments, and they betrayed every Texan who trusted them to respond to emergencies. We've arrested all 78 paramedics, seized 12 ambulance companies, and confiscated 2.8 tons of narcotics that were being transported in vehicles designed for medical emergencies. The charges were severe: drug trafficking, conspiracy, using emergency vehicles in commission of crimes, and for coordinators, racketeering. The 78 paramedics faced 45 years in federal prison. Marcus Rodriguez and other coordinators faced life sentences. Texas revoked the medical licenses of all 78 paramedics immediately. They would never work in emergency medical services again. The Texas Department of State Health Services launched investigations into how the 12 companies had passed inspections while operating as cartel fronts. Faced with overwhelming evidence, 64 of the 78 paramedics accepted plea agreements within 6 months. They received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years depending on their level of involvement. At sentencing hearings, several expressed remorse, though prosecutors noted that remorse came only after being caught transporting poison in ambulances. 14 defendants, including Rodriguez, went to trial in May 2025. Prosecutors presented surveillance footage of ambulances making drug transfers, GPS data showing route deviations, hidden compartments with drugs, financial records showing $67 million in cartel investment and millions in payoffs, and testimony from cooperating paramedics. Expert witnesses testified about the danger. Transporting drugs in ambulances meant that during real emergencies, patients could be exposed to narcotics, equipment could be contaminated, and the fundamental trust in emergency services was destroyed. One emergency medicine physician testified, "When paramedics use ambulances to traffic drugs, they don't just commit crimes, they undermine every legitimate paramedic and every patient who needs emergency care." The jury convicted all 14 defendants on all counts. At sentencing in August 2025, Marcus Rodriguez received life in prison without parole. The judge's words were harsh. "You purchased ambulance companies, services designed to save lives, and turned them into drug delivery vehicles. You recruited 78 paramedics and corrupted the emergency medical profession. You made fake 911 calls and endangered real patients. You will die in federal prison." The other coordinators received sentences from 40 to 60 years. The remaining paramedics who'd gone to trial received 35 to 45 years each. The 12 ambulance companies were dissolved, and their assets, including 145 ambulances, facilities, and equipment, were seized and sold. Proceeds went to funding legitimate emergency medical services in underserved Texas communities. Texas implemented comprehensive reforms, enhanced background checks for paramedics, random inspections of private ambulance companies, GPS monitoring of all ambulance routes with flags for deviations, and financial audits of companies to detect suspicious ownership. The state also created anonymous reporting systems for emergency medical personnel to report suspected corruption. President Trump addressed Operation Code Red during a speech on cartel enforcement. 78 paramedics in Texas used ambulances to smuggle $1.1 billion in drugs for the Sinaloa Cartel. They betrayed their profession, endangered patients, and corrupted emergency services. But we arrested every single one, prosecuted them, and they will spend decades in federal prison. No profession is safe from cartel infiltration, but no corrupt professional is safe from federal prosecution. The investigation revealed the broader threat. Cartels had attempted to infiltrate emergency services in other states. Similar investigations were launched in Arizona, New Mexico, and California, leading to additional arrests. The 78 former paramedics sit in federal prisons across the country, their medical licenses revoked permanently, their careers destroyed, their freedom gone. And every legitimate paramedic in Texas now works under enhanced scrutiny, paying the price for the betrayal of 78 who chose money over the sacred duty to save lives. If you believe Truth America is essential to exposing how cartels corrupt the institutions you trust, then like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. Share this with everyone who depends on emergency services, because you need to know that even ambulances can be weaponized by cartels. This is why we exist, to expose the infiltration of trusted services, the betrayal of sacred professions, and the federal operations that restore integrity. This is Truth America, protecting the institutions that protect you. We'll see you in the next one.